You wake up in a world with no enemies, no rival nations, no competing tribes, no political opponents, no dangerous outsiders, no one to blame. At first it sounds like paradise, but then something strange happens. People start creating enemies anyway, not because they are evil, not because they enjoy conflict, but because the human mind seems unable to function without an us and a them. In fact, some researchers argue that humans don't merely fight enemies. We need them. And that idea leads to a disturbing question. What if some of the conflicts that shape history are not accidents of human nature, but products of it? Because throughout history one pattern appears again and again. When external enemies disappear, societies often turn inward. And when there is nobody left to fear, people begin fearing each other. One startling example comes from anthropology. For most of human history, humans lived in small tribes, groups rarely larger than a few dozen individuals. Resources were limited, territory mattered, trust was survival, and according to anthropologist Robin Dunbar, humans evolved in tightly connected social groups where belonging was everything. Being excluded wasn't merely uncomfortable, it could be fatal. A lone human on the prehistoric landscape was vulnerable to predators, starvation, and rival groups. So your brain evolved to obsess over social membership. You became highly sensitive to who belonged and who didn't, who was friend, who was foe. This instinct became deeply wired into human psychology. And thousands of years later, it is still running beneath modern civilization. You may think you choose your groups, but often your groups choose you. Nationality, religion, politics, sports teams, even music preferences. Human beings constantly divide themselves into tribes. The strange part is how little it takes. In 1971, psychologist Henry Tajfel conducted one of the most famous experiments in social psychology. Known as the minimal group paradigm, participants were divided into groups based on meaningless criteria, sometimes random assignments, sometimes trivial preferences. The groups had no history, no competition, no real differences, yet people immediately began favoring members of their own group. They rewarded insiders. They discriminated against outsiders. Simply belonging was enough. Think about that. People didn't need a reason to create division. The division itself created the reason. The enemy came after the boundary, not before it. This reveals something uncomfortable. Humans often do not discover tribes. They manufacture them. And once a tribe exists, the search for enemies begins almost automatically. Because enemies serve a powerful psychological function. They create clarity. The world is complicated. Enemies make it simple. They transform uncertainty into certainty, ambiguity into confidence, complex problems into obvious villains. Psychologists call this social identity theory. Part of your self-worth comes from the groups you belong to. And groups gain strength when they compare themselves against others. The stronger...
This audio was created with async.com.
Groups gain strength when they compare themselves against others. The stronger the contrast, the stronger the identity. This helps explain why societies often become more unified during external threats, after terrorist attacks, during wars, following natural disasters. Differences inside the group temporarily shrink. People focus on a shared enemy or challenge. Suddenly everyone knows who we are, because everyone knows who they are. The enemy acts like social glue, a dangerous glue, but glue nonetheless. History provides countless examples. Ancient Athens united against Persia. Greek city-states that constantly fought each other suddenly found common purpose. The same pattern appeared throughout medieval Europe. Competing kingdoms frequently suspended internal conflicts when confronted by external threats. Even modern nations often experience spikes in social cohesion during wartime. But there is a hidden cost. The same mechanism that creates unity also creates distortion. Because once humans identify an enemy, they stop seeing individuals. They start seeing categories. This process was explored by psychologist Musafa Sherif in the famous Robbers Cave experiment. 22 boys attended what appeared to be an ordinary summer camp. Researchers divided them into two groups. At first, each group developed its own culture and identity. Then competition was introduced. Almost immediately, hostility exploded. Sabotage. The groups rapidly developed negative stereotypes about each other. The enemy wasn't born from deep ideological differences. The enemy emerged from group identity itself. And perhaps the most fascinating part came later. When researchers forced both groups to cooperate toward shared goals, hostility gradually disappeared. The enemies became partners. Nothing about the individuals had fundamentally changed, only the social context. That finding echoes through history. Many enemies are less permanent than they appear. Today's mortal threat often becomes tomorrow's ally. The identities feel eternal. The reality rarely is, yet the urge remains, because enemies do more than strengthen group identity. They also give meaning. This may sound strange, but humans are storytelling creatures. We constantly construct narratives about who we are and why we exist, and stories become much easier when there is a villain. Heroes need obstacles. Movements need opposition. Nations need threats. The presence of an enemy transforms ordinary existence into a mission. Without conflict, purpose can feel harder to find. The philosopher Carl Schmitt argued that politics itself revolves around the distinction between friend and enemy. His ideas remain controversial, but they highlight something important. Human societies repeatedly organize themselves around perceived threats, not necessarily because threats are always real, but because threats are powerful organizers of attention. Fear focuses the mind. It cuts through complexity. It tells people where to look, what to value, whom to trust, and whom to distrust. The problem is that the brain often treats symbolic threats as if they were physical dangers. A political disagreement can trigger emotional responses similar to survival threats. A challenge to beliefs can feel like an attack on identity itself. Neuroscientist Matthew Lieberman has shown that social pain activates many of the same brain regions involved in physical pain. Rejection hurts. Exclusion hurts. Threats to identity hurt. Your brain often reacts as though survival is on the line, even when it isn't. This creates a dangerous feedback loop. The more strongly people identify with a group, the more threatening outsiders appear. The more threatening outsiders appear, the more tightly people cling to the group. Fear strengthens identity. Identity amplifies fear. And enemies become increasingly useful, not because they are accurate, because they are emotionally rewarding. You can see this mechanism everywhere today. Social media promised global connection. Instead, it often amplifies tribal conflict. Algorithms quickly learn something about human attention. Conflict is engaging. Outrage spreads. Enemies generate clicks. Every disagreement becomes evidence.
This audio was created with async.com.
Enemies generate clicks. Every disagreement becomes evidence. Every mistake becomes ammunition. Every opposing group becomes easier to caricature. In some ways, modern technology has transformed ancient tribal instincts into a global system. The tribes got bigger. The psychology stayed the same. And the consequences are enormous. Research from political scientists has found that many people increasingly dislike members of opposing political groups, not because of policy differences alone, but because group identity itself has become emotionally charged. The rival group becomes morally suspect. Again, the pattern appears. The enemy simplifies reality, but reality is rarely simple. History shows what happens when this instinct goes unchecked. Some of humanity's darkest chapters emerged when entire populations were reduced to enemy categories. Individuals disappeared. Labels remained. Once people stop seeing human beings and start seeing symbols, almost anything becomes possible. The terrifying lesson is that ordinary minds are capable of extraordinary hostility under the right conditions. Not because humans are uniquely cruel, because humans are uniquely tribal. Yet this isn't the end of the story. The same psychology that creates enemies also contains the solution. Remember the robber's cave experiment. Hostility faded when groups shared a larger goal. The tribal instinct didn't disappear. It expanded. The circle grew wider. This may be one of the most important insights about human nature. Humans cannot eliminate group identity, but they can redefine it. The question is never whether tribes will exist. The question is how large they become. Family. Humanity. Every level changes who counts as us. Astronauts often describe a phenomenon called the overview effect. Looking at Earth from space, national borders vanish. Political divisions disappear. The planet appears as a single fragile system floating in darkness. Many astronauts report feeling an overwhelming sense of human unity. The enemies that seem so important on the ground suddenly look strangely artificial. The perspective changed. The tribe expanded. Perhaps that is the deeper lesson hidden beneath thousands of years of conflict. Humans need belonging. Humans need identity. Humans need meaning. But they do not necessarily need enemies. What they need is a shared story powerful enough to replace them. Because an enemy is often just a shortcut to unity, a substitute for a larger purpose. And the moment people find something bigger than their divisions, the enemy begins to lose its power. Maybe that is why the most dangerous enemy is not another tribe, not another nation, not another ideology. It is the unconscious instinct that constantly searches for someone to place outside the circle. The easiest way to unite people is to divide them. History has proven that lesson many times. The harder task is expanding the circle instead. And that may be one of the defining challenges of being human. If you enjoyed this exploration into psychology, history, and human behavior, consider subscribing for more videos that uncover the hidden forces shaping the way we think, live, and see the world.